Good morning, folks. You know, I'm out here on the range. We're going to be doing another one of our PAC-T tests. In this test, I'm testing two different bullets. One of them is brand new for me, and it is the Underwood Ammo 105 grain Maximum Expansion bullet. And the second is kind of my reigning champion. It's the 124 grain Sig Sauer or Sierra V Crown. Obviously 9mm Luger, 9mm Parabellum rounds. I'll be shooting with this HK VP9. I just outfitted this one not too long ago with a Trijicon RMR 6.5 MOA red dot on it, and it really shoots very, very nicely. But anyway, back to the bullets. We're going to be doing our standard PAC-T test. That is 5 rounds for precision from 15 yards off the bench, and also going to be scoring for accuracy on that bullseye target. The C part of PAC-T, Charlie, comes from consistency. We're going to be using the lab radar chronograph to measure the standard deviation of those muzzle velocities. That's my consistency measurement. And the T part of it is terminal performance. 1 round into 20% NATO block ballistic gelatin, synthetic ballistic gelatin from 7 yards. Now there's a little bit of a difference that I'll be doing with this terminal ballistic test. Normally I fire it into bare ballistic gelatin. Done quite a number of those tests. Very recently though, we did a best of the best, and we really put these bullets to the test. And what I did there is I used a pretty hard, well, a very hard barrier that actually showed that the Sig Sauer V Crown, the Sierra V Crown, really did a great job. But one of the problems with that hard barrier was that the bullet had to pass through some medium density fiberboard, and that stuff kind of powdered and clogged every one of the bullets. Every one of the bullets clogged. So the whole idea of that test, though, was to have a nice hard barrier. It started off going through some Formica, then into the medium density fiberboard. Well, you can watch all that. What I've done this time is I have a much thinner hard barrier. We're starting with some sweatshirt material, just some really, really thin cardboard. I needed something to affix all this stuff together, and then a very thin sheet of laminate. Formica type laminate. That's my hard barrier. Now, the interesting thing about this Underwood Ammo Maximum Expansion bullet is it is designed, in theory, to pass through hard barriers completely intact and only expand when it meets a hydraulic barrier. In other words, something soft and has water, some sort of consistency like water. Our ballistic gelatin. Let's see if that theory holds up and how it does. And we're also going to be comparing it to that same Sig Sauer 124 grain V Crown. Well, let's go ahead and get started off the bench with that bullseye type test. Doing pretty good. Stepping out over 1,200 feet per second. There we go. Standard deviation of 6 feet per second, average 1,212, which is interesting because this one is on the box rated at 1,175. We got more velocity out of this one. Now this is interesting. We pretty much have very, very similar standard deviations, 7.8 feet per second. Again, whenever we can keep any of our rounds into single digits, we're in excellent shape. Average 1,191. A little bit of rounding, we're talking about 1,200 feet per second also. But this is a 124 grain bullet, a lot heavier in the world of handgun bullets than that Underwood Maximum Expansion bullet. Now let me comment for just a moment on the velocities we're seeing here. You see, not too long ago, we did a video series on reloading for the 9mm Luger, and one of the bullets that I loaded was the 90 grain 9mm bullet. Really, it's intended for use in the 380 auto, but I loaded it up for the 9mm Luger, and I was getting, when I worked up the load, I was getting 1,450 feet per second out of the muzzle. We then followed up with a PAC-T test where I had kind of tweaked that load for optimal accuracy out of a couple of the different handguns I was using, and we ended up getting, on average, slightly over 1,400 feet per second out of the muzzle. Now that's a 90 grain bullet. Today we're seeing a 124 grain bullet giving us, about 1,200 feet per second. So doing just a little bit of math, we can calculate the estimated or predicted muzzle velocity of a 105 grain bullet, and what we should be getting along that curve or along that line is about 1,300 feet per second. We're not getting that. We're getting 1,200 feet per second, slightly over that. The advertised velocity is 1,175 feet per second. Now, why is that? I suspect the reason for this is because the manufacturer knows that if that particular bullet is driven at too high of a velocity, that those petals that are going to expand will, at higher velocities, may be broken off in that expansion process, which then defeats the whole purpose and is going to effectively be the same as a clogged hollow point bullet. This is my hard barrier for this test. I have a piece of hoodie, sweatshirt hoodie material glued to a piece of cardboard made into almost like a book. Here is two very thin pieces of Formica laminate. I glued these in with a spray adhesive, nothing very thick, and I'm going to affix this to the front of that ballistic gelatin. The round will enter here, pass through into the gel. Decent wound channel right there. I had another bullet or two I had fired in this previously. You probably noticed that. But we have a decent expansion and not too terribly deep or too terribly shallow. This is a 16-inch block, about 8 inches here. So that looks pretty decent. We're going to get all the full measurements off this once I get back into the shop, and we'll weigh this bullet, look for its, measure its maximum expansion, so on. Okay, now let's try the Sig Sauer V-Crown. Same type of test. All right, well, I purposely shot a little bit lower because I wanted to avoid these wound channels that were already in the block. So I hit here. It went right where I wanted it to. That was very nice. And it passed entirely through the 16-inch block, and it's over here. Let's take a look. It is right there. Penetrated about 3-4 inches into this block. Again, we'll get full measurement when I'm back in. And I don't know if I can rotate this so you can see it, but it looks like we have not gotten any expansion. It looks like it clogged. I'm back in now and just pulled those bullets out of the ballistic gelatin. I weighed them, I measured them. Time to recap and see how each of these performed. Let's start with the PAC part of the test, precision, accuracy, and consistency, and we'll start in the same order, walk through this in the same order that we shot them out on the range. And that is to start with the Underwood ammo first. And by the way, I thought this was kind of interesting. I went out to Underwood's website and saw their details for this particular bullet that they're using here. And again, this is the 105 grain maximum expansion monolithic hunting and self-defense ammo. This is designed to expand upon contact with a fluid-based medium through hydraulic energy. These bullets do not expand on dry mediums like wood, drywall, bone, or sheet metal. The expansion process of Lehigh's maximum expansion technology is very different than that of traditional lead-jacketed bullets. By the way, this is ammunition manufactured by Underwood, but the bullet is designed and manufactured by Lehigh. And we shot some Lehigh Extreme Penetrators a couple of years ago, and boy, those things really penetrate through ballistic gelatin. Bare ballistic gelatin zips right through two of them like a hot knife through butter. But let's talk about this maximum expansion bullet and how it performed on precision, accuracy, and consistency. Well, this is the bullet. This is the bullseye target right here. And what we're looking at is a 1.495, let's say a 1.5 inch extreme spread. The average muzzle velocity was 1,212 feet per second. I noted that out at the range. And it scored 38 points with 0 in the X. Now, it's a pretty nice group, really. Pretty nice group. One dropped a little bit low, but otherwise, overall, for a handgun at 15 yards, that's not too bad. This gun obviously not zeroed for this particular load, so if we had been able to zero it and pull it down into position, it would have scored really well. It is what it is, though, and pretty nice group size, but not the greatest of score on accuracy. Good precision, not so good on the accuracy. The 124 grain V-Crown, Sierra V-Crown. Again, Sierra is the company that makes this bullet. It's normally in a factory load loaded in the Sig Sauer rounds, and then Sig Sauer actually selling these bullets as well, but as I understand it, they are still being manufactured. They were originally designed and still being manufactured by Sierra. So extreme, boy, this really did nice. Extreme spread just over an inch, so very nice precision and pretty darn nice accuracy. Now I'll note that this Trijicon RMR that I have on the VP9 is zeroed for this particular load, but it's zeroed at 25 yards. That's why it shot a little bit high at 15 yards. And if I was shooting at 25 yards and could hold nice on this at 25 yards, probably could. It probably would have expanded a little bit, but the accuracy would have been a little bit better. But still, not terribly bad accuracy. 46 points with 0 in the X. Obviously, a maximum of 50 points possible. That would be where all 5 of the rounds impacted in the 10 ring. But kind of what's more interesting, I suppose, to me, the main part of the test is the T part of the test, the terminal ballistics. And this is the bullet that I retrieved for the maximum expansion round. It did expand pretty much exactly as described. And what you may have noticed that one of these petals broke off about 2 inches into the flight into that ballistic gelatin, and that you might have noticed that in the ballistic gelatin when we're looking at it out at the range. It's also interesting that a little bit of sweatshirt material clung to this, and I extricated that from the ballistic gelatin as well. The hard barrier, that's this right here. Not too much to look at, I suppose, but let's go ahead and take a peek anyway. So it did pass through that one piece of that Formica laminate right there. And overall results, we had 9.5 inches of penetration, and it did have, I'll call it the jacket separation, where we lost that one pedal. That bullet weighed 99.8 grains when it was extricated from the ballistic gelatin. That's 95% weight retention. It did expand to 0.765. That is over 200% expansion, 215% expansion. And the length of the retrieved bullet, so it did retain pretty decent amount of shank to help it drive forward in a straight line. The overall score for the maximum expansion bullet was 380 points out of a possible 500 points. And I will note that very recently, just a couple episodes ago, I tested the Federal HST bullet, and kind of in hindsight, I'm thinking maybe I should have taken that bullet out as well, or some of those bullets out as well, because that bullet actually scored really, really well for us, 437 points. But I don't know how that bullet would perform going through the hard barrier. And by the way, if folks are interested in seeing us do a test on a specific bullet, or a little bit of a twist on some of these tests like HST through the hard barrier, let us know. If there's sufficient interest, we might be able to do that in the future. Well, let's talk now about the V-Crown, 124 grain V-Crown. This is it, and it clogged. Now that actually is kind of, in some ways, kind of worrisome, because it didn't have much to go through. Little bit of cardboard, very thin cardboard, sweatshirt material, and of course that little bit of very hard Formica laminate. But it clogged. It really clogged. Total depth of penetration was 20.25 inches. Remember, it went through entirely one block, and then 4.25 inches into the second block. Weight retention, actually it ended up weighing 124.5 grains. It picked up and obviously held that stuff in the hollow point, so it gained a little bit of weight. Diameter of the retrieved bullet is exactly the same. It's 0.355 of an inch, the 9mm bullet size. So really no expansion whatsoever. And the length of the retrieved bullet was, again, the full length that it started at. It only scored 162.5 points, and previously had just about gotten to the 400-point range. It was 397.5 points originally. And it really did a beautiful job going through that bare ballistic gelatin. But now that we've gone through some barrier tests, it doesn't really look that great. And I always do remind people that just because a bullet does not mushroom, doesn't mean it's not lethal. There has been a lot of folks killed with full metal jackets, especially during war times, and you hear lots of stuff about the 1911 in particular, and the 230 grain FMJ taking down the enemy. So the results of this one are kind of very interesting. It becomes sort of a trade-off. What we have is we have a 124 grain bullet that penetrated through the hard barrier all the way through 20.25 inches. Without the hard barrier, that bullet performed really, really well. I think it was about 11 inch, just about ideal penetration in the ballistic gelatin. That's the Sierra V-Crown. On the other hand, we have another bullet that is only 105 grains. It did successfully pass through that hard barrier, and then it expanded as it's intended to inside the soft ballistic gelatin. It simulated quite nicely, obviously, that hydraulic effect that this bullet was designed to perform under. And that's all good. It really worked quite well. And the transient cavitation channel, that temporary wound channel, looked pretty impressive, without a doubt, as it's going through, that 9.5 inches of the ballistic gelatin before it came to rest. But we only have a 105 grain bullet, effectively a 100 grain bullet, pushing all the way through because we lost that one pedal, whereas we have a 124 grain bullet zipping all the way through. I'm kind of wondering now if I eliminated the hard barrier but retained just the sweatshirt material, how these bullets would perform, and maybe also looking at that Federal HST. If you're interested, once again, in those kind of things, just put your comments in the comment section below, and we'll see what we can do in the future on additional episodes of the PAC-T test series. Hey, thanks for watching. Take care.